Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So good to see you here. If this is your first time watching my video, my name is Anita and this is the place to be for non-native English speakers who want to stay inspired and confident. So today's topic is something that's really close to my heart, and I think anyone who's learned a foreign language, especially English as a second language before, would be able to relate to what I'm going to share in today's video. Because I feel like there is this expectation when you learn English that if you speak English with a British, American or Australian accent, or any accent that's authentic sounding, that makes you sound like you're from one of the English speaking countries, then you're deemed successful as a non-native English speaker. But if you think about it, it's simply unfair to set the bar this high for yourself, expecting yourself to sound like a native speaker when you were simply not born into the language. Having an accent is just inevitable if you didn't learn the language as a child. It's really just an unavoidable effect of having learned a language after a certain developmental window has closed. Now, I think it's definitely possible to change or reduce your accent. And I'm not saying having a decent accent is not important or that your accent is not worth working on. I just think it's not as important as many language enthusiasts make it out to be. Putting too much emphasis on having a perfect sounding accent is really doing you as a non-native English speaker a huge disservice. Because trust me, you will get frustrated and discouraged when you talk to native speakers and realize you sound nothing like them. Shocking! And to make it worse, you now start this crazy story in your head thinking, oh my god, I sound so stupid compared to them. I don't sound like one of them. And it just goes on and on and on. If that's something you're really struggling with right now and you want to know how to learn to love your accents and overcome the fear of being judged for speaking English with an accent, well, you've come to the right place. Let's keep watching. Tip number 1, clarity is so much more important than your accent. So I've told many students from different parts of the world over the past 5 years since I started teaching, and the students that I considered effective English communicators all had wonderfully different accents, but they all had one thing in common, which was they all spoke very clearly and were easy to understand. Hence my point, instead of worrying about your accent, I want you to shift your focus and focus on your speaking habits instead. Because you know what? The speaking habits that prevent non-native English speakers from being understood are the same ones that can make native English speakers hard to understand. These bad habits include not knowing where you're going with your points. I think I just lost my train of thought. So notice here, none of the bad speaking habits mentioned above are about accents, right? Because to be honest, if accents were really that big of an issue, wouldn't that mean we are only able to communicate with people who spoke with very, very similar or the same accents, which is just ridiculous. Also, I'd focus on fluency and pronunciation first instead of your accent, because let me put it this way, let's say you're this super hardcore non-native English speaker who wants to sound like a native speaker no matter what, and you've invested a crazy amount of time and energy into perfecting your accent, and now, yeah, you sound American or British or whatever, but when you are in a conversation with a native speaker, you make mistakes and simply can't express yourself well. You can't get your points across. They may mistakenly think, yes, you sound like a native speaker who is unintelligent and uneducated. Whereas if you speak with a little bit of an accent, but you express yourself very well and you speak clearly, then you're more likely to portray the opposite image where you sound intelligent and educated. Well, which one would you choose? Okay, tip number 2, get people's honest opinions on your accent. So, if you're really worried about your accent, it's always a good idea to just talk to someone you trust who's a native English speaker and ask for the honest assessment of how your accent comes across. Ask them to be honest and not just say nice things that you want to hear. Take myself as an example. I got all kinds of feedback on my accent over the past 13 years, ever since I moved to Australia. Some people said I had a unique accent and then they couldn't really pinpoint exactly where I'm from. Some people say I sound like I grew up in Australia. And very recently, I also had someone who commented on my accent and said, I sound French. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is once you start collecting feedback from people, chances are you'll realize it's really all in your head and your accent is not nearly as bad as you think. If people do say you have a strong accent, ask them if it impedes the clarity of your speech, and if it doesn't, then I wouldn't worry about it. And if it does, then figure out whether it's a pronunciation problem, vocabulary or grammatical problem, or you simply have bad speaking habits. So yeah, it's just ask. All you have to do is ask to gain some perspective. Are you ready for the next tip, my friend? Alright, tip number 3. Don't put other people on a pedestal just because they are native speakers or near native speakers. I've talked about a similar mindset in one of my previous videos, how to build closer friendships with native speakers. So if you missed a video, I'll provide the link somewhere here. Now, I can't stress how important it is to not put native speakers on a pedestal when you talk to them, meaning treating them like they're more important, they're better, and you are inferior just because you have an accent and make a few mistakes here and there. I know it's so easy to feel intimidated and feel like they're judging every single word you say. But it's exactly because of this fear that many people tend to shy away from the opportunity to use a language with native speakers. Like, they get all quiet and awkward. And you know what? The opposite is actually true. Having an accent means you speak at least one other language, right? And for many of you, it probably also means you're bilingual and therefore considered intelligent. Trust me, I'm sure people around you are aware of this and they might even be a bit envious because you know the effort and time it takes to master the language, and you know what? Someone of lower intelligence would never ever be able to accomplish something like this. Also, if you think about it, a lot of native English speakers learning a foreign language also speak the targeted language with their English sounding accent, right? For example, Australians speaking Chinese with an Australian accent, Americans speaking French with an American accent. It's common and it's just part of the language learning process. So don't beat yourself up for having an accent, and don't let this be an excuse to not let yourself shine in your oral practice. Now, I have one final tip for you, which is just enjoy it. Enjoy the joy of communication. Being able to communicate with people is so wonderful. It's so about relating and connecting. As long as you slow down when you talk and you open your mouth and pronounce words clearly, you talk with good energy, excitement, and passion, people will be there for you. Now I'm curious. I want you to scroll down to the comment section and let me know which part of the world you're from and whether you're struggling with your own accent. Does your accent bother you? Now, as usual, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, jump on board. I'd love to have you in my YouTube family. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!